Thanks for joining us on a road trip through rabbinic narrative. No agenda, just clarity. All right, so we've been interested in some of the Divrei Chazal that talk about Pharaoh's astrologers and their influence on his decision-making. It is interesting to note that you don't hear about the astrologers in the psukim themselves. The most we hear about are his chartumim, which are his magicians. But Chazal seem to take the position that he had astrologers that were looking into the future and helping him make decisions about policy. Probably one of the most popular ones is in the very beginning of Parsha Shemos, when Pharaoh is strategizing to stunt the population growth of Bnei Yisrael. His first attempt fails, where he instructs the midwives to intervene at childbirth to kill the babies without the mothers noticing, but that plan fails. And afterwards, the pasuk says in Perek Aleph, pasuk Chaf Beis, Vayitzav Paro l'chol amo lemor, and Paro commands to all of his nation, Kol haben hayilod hayor tashichu v'chalabas techayun. Right, any boy that's born, throw him into the yor, and any girl that's born can live. So the Pashup shot is that he's referring to Jewish babies, not all babies, including Egyptians, right? And in fact, if you look at Targum Onkelos, that's exactly how he translates it. He says, "V'kei paro l'chol amei l'meimar kol barad de yis yilid lihudae benahara termune." Right? That clearly Paro is referring to the Jewish babies, not the Egyptian babies. But if you take a look at Rashi on the spot, so Rashi on the pasuk says, "L'kolamo af alehem gazar," right? Even on the Egyptians did he decree. This is quoting a Gemara in Sota, and he continues, "Yom shenolad Moshe amru lo at ninav." So the day that Moshe was born, his astrologers said to him, "Hayom nolad Moshiach," the Savior was born. Ve'en ani yodim im Mitzrayim im Yisrael, but we don't know if he is from the Egyptians or from the Jews. But we do see that ultimately he's going to be afflicted by water. Therefore, Pharaoh instituted on that day that even the Egyptian babies be included in this. Shnamar kol haben hayilod, right? Because the pasuk says kol haben hayilod. Below namar hayilod le'ivrim, but it doesn't say those who are born to the Ivrim. Vehim lo hayilod mishasof alukos al memriva. But Rashi seems to be saying that the astrologers didn't know that really it was referring to the fact that Moshe was going to be afflicted by the Mei Meriva, the waters of Meriva, referring to almost 120 years later, when Moshe gets punished by hitting the rock that's supposed to provide water for Bnei Yisrael instead of speaking to it. We had a couple of problems when analyzing this particular Rashi. First of all, just in general, are we saying that there's credence to what the astrologers think or what they see or what they point out? It seems to be we're giving them some credence because it's kind of like they were right to a certain degree, but they were wrong about a detail. They got the general idea right that there was a Moshiach born and that he was going to face his downfall with water. It's just they chose the wrong water, right? They thought the water would be the Nile, and it turns out that the water was referring to something that was going to happen 120 years in the future. That is one way you can learn it. We think that that's a difficult approach, but certainly possible. Additionally, it doesn't seem to jive with the pshat of the pasuk. The pshat of the pasuk is that Pharaoh is referring to Jewish-born baby boys, not to the Egyptian baby boys. So where Chazal even getting this from, that he was referring to Egyptian boys as well? I mean, that's like crazy behavior for him to go and start killing his own population as well. And then what is this idea that they knew that Moshiach was born, but they didn't know if he was from Mitzrayim or from Yisrael? That seems to be like a really important detail to know, Why is it that the astrologers, they didn't know this part? So, we figured these are pretty challenging questions to answer, and we think that it requires really a different approach to this Midrash in order to glean what's going on here. So, what could possibly be the message here, and what's actually going on? So, what we wanted to say is that, first of all, we don't think that this is Chazal's way of giving credence to astrology. There may have been people of Chazal or even Rishonim that thought there was some truth behind astrology. That's a separate machlokes amongst Rishonim or even amongst Chazal, but we don't think that's really what's going on here. This doesn't seem like this is just according to those people. We think that the astrologers is really just a literary mechanism that Chazal are using to make a point. So what is that point? So it's interesting. Pharaoh was really onto something, and what was that? See, in general, if you look at history and different political movements, different rulers, and how long they've lasted and what their downfalls are, there's just a certain tendency in history for a king to rule, and eventually there's a downfall, and then a new kingdom takes its place. And so here you have a situation where the Mitzrayim were at a high while oppressing a particular nation. It's only part of human nature, social reality, that this can last so long, because eventually someone's going to wake up, some revolutionary is going to wake up and see how unjust this is, and is going to try and make a change. Now, usually we would think that would happen from the people who are being oppressed, because they're the ones who are experiencing the most, and someone from amongst them is going to wake up and gather people and galvanize the troops and stage a rebellion. But there are times when even amongst the oppressors, somebody wakes up and sees how unjust this really is and makes his own movement. So it could be that that's what Pharaoh was nervous about. Pharaoh seemed to understand this can't go on forever. There's going to be a time when somebody realizes how unjust this actually is and is going to make a move against me. Most likely it's going to be from the Jews, from the oppressed people. But it's possible that it can come from the Egyptians as well. So Pharaoh saw, so to speak, the fact that this was an inevitability, and he wanted to do something to control that. He wanted to do something to prevent that from occurring. It's, so to speak, it's as if he was willing to go as far as murdering the Egyptian-born boys as well, just so that he could squash the possibility of this rebellion, of this person, this individual, this Moshe, who's bound to arise, who's going to challenge him. That's how far he was willing to go, and that's how deep this fear was in him. I think that's what Chazal are pointing out. What does it mean, the astrologers? I think the astrologers just means that, like, they're looking into the future because this is just how the world works. This is just how social realities, this is how history works. There's going to come a time where there's going to be someone who's going to get up and not tolerate this. And so Pharaoh wanted to do everything he could to control the situation and to, so to speak, squash the Moshe. So what were Chazal saying? that it's like they were right, that this person was going to be brought to his downfall by water. It's just they were wrong about the water, and they were wrong about the time, right? They were, so to speak, referring to something 120 years into the future, and they weren't even talking about the Nile River. They were talking about the water that was supposed to come out of the rock. Clearly, this is a very important detail for them to be missing. So were they onto something? Were they right, or were they wrong? And if they were wrong, then why do we even care what they had to say? So it's possible that the lesson that's being drawn out here is that Pharaoh really was picking up on something, and Pharaoh's concern was legitimate. But what he didn't realize is that it's not anything that he can control. He has no ability to control what the inevitable history was going to be. But you want to know who has the ability to control the downfall of the Moshiach? Only the Moshe himself. If Moshe Rabbeinu is going to be that person who is going to galvanize and lead the rebellion and help the Jews get out of Mitzrayim, it was going to happen no matter what. The only person that could be responsible for taking down Moshe Rabbeinu is Moshe Rabbeinu himself. But we think that that's the point that Chazal are trying to make, that on the one hand, his fear was legitimate, but the fact that he tried to control the situation was really not legitimate. And in fact, the irony is that the only possible way, it's almost like saying there is no way, you can't control this. You're not going to squash the Moshiach. If there's something like this that's bound to happen, it's going to happen, right? But the only one who is capable of taking down the Moshiach, of taking down this person, is the very person himself, which is illustrated in the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu's downfall really came from the Mei Meriva. So we just thought this was an interesting point for a lot of reasons. One, it gets out of the problem of having to answer the question of whether or not the astrology is legitimate or not. Here, the astrology is just an analogy. It's just a way of explaining something that's inevitable in the future. It also explains not having to nitpick and figure out why the astrologers knew X, but they didn't know why. Because this didn't really happen. The astrologers didn't have this conversation with Pharaoh. It's just a way of expressing the fact that Pharaoh picked up on something that he knew was inevitable. It was something he tried to control. He was, so to speak, willing to go to such extreme measures in order to control it. And the irony is that he had no control over it. And in fact, the only one who was able to bring down Moshe Rabbeinu was actually Moshe Rabbeinu himself.